Hello, welcome to netvn. In this video I show how to create a link shortener server on Windows 11 using a virtual machine. This server will help you shorten links and share them for everyone to access over the internet. I install Ubuntu server operating system for virtual machine. You go to the Ubuntu homepage and download the latest version of the server operating system. Here is the file after it is downloaded. Here I download Ubuntu server version 22.04. To create virtual machines I use the VMware Workstation Hypervisor. You can use other hypervisors to create virtual machines, for example VirtualBox, VMware Player. I create a new virtual machine Ubuntu server. You then set up your network in bridge mode, which will help you configure port forwarding in the next steps. Next you turn on the virtual machine and start installing Ubuntu server. You set the language, keyboard, Ubuntu server. You set up a static IP address for the Ubuntu server. Static IP address helps you configure port forwarding on your router. I assign this Ubuntu server IP address 192.168.11.9. Next is the hard drive settings. I recommend you leave the default. You will then be asked to create a new admin account and name the server Ubuntu. I named the server YOURLS, because to shorten the link I will install open source software called YOURLS. You install OpenSSH server to be able to connect remotely to Ubuntu server using SSH. Installation begins. It will take about 5 to 10 minutes to complete. You wait until the reboot request appears. Press the Enter key and reboot. Wait a moment for the Ubuntu server to start. You use the admin account created in the previous step to log into the Ubuntu server. This is the IP address I assigned to the Ubuntu server. You use this IP address to connect to it from a Windows computer. On a Windows computer you open a command window. Then you use the command called SSH and connect to the Ubuntu server virtual machine. SSH username and IP address. Yes. You enter the admin password when prompted. Here are the steps to install YOURLS on Ubuntu server. I will do it step by step. Most of the steps are copy and paste commands. First you update the Ubuntu operating system. Next you install Apache. Installing Apache will turn the Ubuntu server into a web server. You make sure Apache is running. Next you install PHP and its additional packages. You need a database to store the links, so you install MariaDB. After installing MariaDB, you create a new database. Here I create a new database named YOURLS. Username is YOURLS and password is strong password. You can create a new database with a different username and password if you want. You write down the database name, username and password to connect to it in the next step. As mentioned, you install YOURLS to shorten the link. And here are the steps to install YOURLS on Ubuntu server. You download YOURLS to Ubuntu server. Then you move the downloaded files to a directory called var www. This is where web pages are stored. Next you go to the folder named users. Then you create a new configuration file from the sample configuration file. New configuration file named config.php. You edit the configuration file with an editor called Nano. You update the information to connect to the database created in the previous step. In the previous step I created a new database named YOURLS. This database has username YOURLS and password strong password. Next you update the IP address of the Ubuntu server where the domain name setup is required. In the configuration file you also set up the admin account for YOURLS. Username is netvn, password is pass123. You can create another account if you want. Once done, save your changes and close the configuration file. You set permissions with a folder named YOURLS. Next you configure the web server. On this Ubuntu server I use Apache to create a web server. You copy the default Apache configuration file and name it yourls.conf. You open the newly created configuration file. In this configuration file you set up the host name, which is the IP address of the Ubuntu server. You save your changes and close the file. Next, you browse to the folder named Apache 2. Here you edit the configuration file called apache2.config. You replace the allow overwrite none lines with the allow overwrite all lines. You update all and save the changes. Next, you enable the configuration file called yourls.conf. You disable the default Apache configuration file. To apply the changes, you restart Apache. You check the IP address of the Ubuntu server using the hostname command. On a Windows computer, open any web browser and enter the IP address of the Ubuntu server. A default Apache web page pops up, not what I expected. There's something I'm not doing right and I have to fix it. I remember I haven't edited the path to the folder called YOURLS of the web server configuration file. So I open the configuration file named YOURLS and update the path to the folder named YOURLS. Again, I restarted Apache to apply the change. Going back to the web browser on Windows, I enter the IP address of the Ubuntu server. Install YOURLS. YOURLS welcome page appears. This is what I've been waiting for. Here you use the admin account set up in the previous step to access YOURLS. So I finished installing YOURLS on Ubuntu. I will create a new shortened link and check the results. With just a few simple steps, you have created a new shortened link. But you can only use it in your local network with the same devices connected in the local network. So how to share these links with friends over the internet? I will introduce you in the next part of this video. Because my router uses port 80, so I changed the port of Apache to 81. You open Apache's port configuration file and add port 81. Then you save the configuration and close the file. Next you open your LS web server configuration file and update port 81. You save your changes and close the file. You open the configuration file of the software YOURLS. In this configuration file you update port 81. You can use another port if you want. After you update the configuration files, you restart Apache to apply the changes. Go back to the web browser on a Windows computer. Here you access your LS server using port 81. So I have successfully changed the port from 80 to 81. To access your LS server from the internet, you forward the port on the router. You open the router's management page and forward port 81 to the IP address of the Ubuntu server. In this case I forward port 81 to IP address 192.168.11.9. I need a domain name for your LS. I use DuckDNS service to create a new domain name for free. With the free DuckDNS service you can create up to 5 domains for free. This is the domain name I created and assigned it to the server YOURLS. Next you open the Apache web server configuration file and update the domain name just created. Then you open the configuration file of the software YOURLS. Here you replace the IP address of the Ubuntu server with the domain name. You save your changes and close the file. Again you restart Apache to apply the change. By default, the internet cannot access your LS using the domain name, so you edit the file called hosts on your Windows computer to fix this. You open Notepad with administrative rights. Then browse to the folder where the file is stored called hosts. Windows System 3.2 drivers etc. You add a line like above. Ubuntu server IP address and domain name. You save your changes and close the file. Now you access your LS using the domain name. You can access your LS server via Internet. Now you can create new shortened links and share them with your friends. These shortened links can be used over the Internet. So I have finished showing how to install your LS on Ubuntu server. With your LS you can create shortened links and share them with everyone. These shortened links are created by you, unlimited in number and free. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and help me 600,000 subscribers. There is one last problem that needs to be solved, which is the dynamic mapping of domain names and public IP addresses. If you use dynamic public IP address and when it changes your server loses connection. So you install the DuckDNS client to map your domain name and public IP address. This software requires your computer to have Java installed. You download and install Java for your Windows computer. After completing the installation of DuckDNS client software on your Windows computer, you update the domain name and token for it. You log in DuckDNS and choose your domain name. Then you update the domain name. Next you update the token. With this software, every 5 minutes it will update your public IP address. It will help you to map IP address and domain name. With your LS you can create automatic link shorteners or create custom link shorteners. Thank you for watching. Good luck.